Gentlemen, if you could take turns at checking your mouse and able to move the slides. I'll start with Bill.
Yep.
And Pete.
Okay.
Look at that.
And William.
Hold on a minute. Okay, is that me doing that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
only
just
William
a little
now.
slow response time, but okay, cool.
Yeah, it takes a second.
Good.
I'm gonna pass. We're gonna pass the screen. You're gonna pass the screen share to William when he demos, right?
Are you asking me that?
No, when I introduce William, you want me to?
Yeah, he'll. All three of you have the presentation, nice, and then I have to pass control over to William if he's going to use his computer for anything.
Right, and William, you pass the back. You just when you get rid of your screen, we're going to go back to the. It'll land on the takeaways.
Yep.
Great, and let us go live. Hello everyone, on behalf of Data Gumbo and Prairie Dog, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. I'm Maxine Aikenhead, Business Development Director for Data Gumbo, and I've been in the oil and gas industry for almost 3 decades. I will be your MC today. I hope you enjoyed our introductory video showing how smart contracts and blockchain have been successfully applied to commodity haulage applications in the upstream oil and gas sector, specifically in drilling operations. Today, you will learn how these proven technologies can quick and easily be applied to capital projects, turnarounds, and maintenance, and how they can deliver immediate and significant value for both owners and all members of the project value chain that come together to develop assets for the build environment. The housekeeping today is that this is aimed at being an interactive session, and we encourage you to ask questions during this discussion. We have allotted time at the back end of the webinar to answer any unanswered questions. Please use the questions tab at your GoToWebinar panel. We will also be posting polls throughout the webinar, and your response will contribute to the discussion. We have 3 speakers today joining us. Pete Dumont, CEO of Prairie Dog. Pete has more than 25 years of engineering and construction experience during developing and executing capital projects globally. William Fox, the Chief Product Officer at Data Gumbo. William leads the strategy and design for Data Gumbo's enterprise-grade blockchain network. And thirdly, I'd like to introduce you to Bill Arendt. Bill was previously Microsoft and Oracle, driving productivity and automation through technology, and now Chief Commercial Officer here at Data Gumbo. Let's welcome Bill.
Thank you, Max. We're excited to be here this morning. We appreciate you taking some time out of your day to visit with us. We have a lot on our plate, and we want to share with you some pretty interestingly and timely topics. I think clearly we're in a very unique time where we were actually in our office for a month, and now we're back home. So hopefully there won't be any dogs barking and doorbells ringing. But the fact of the matter is that that's our new normal. And the good part about this for companies is we have to get out of our comfort zone and really challenge ourselves and our organizations to really think about innovating. And when we think about the world that we live in today and the changes that are going to be asked upon all of us, it's really a chance for all to be presented a challenge in this world of choice, right? It's time to enhance the way we do things and challenge the status quo. And one of the things that's really obviously apparent is we have to figure out ways to improve our performance and not let this get in our way. And part of that is the discussion of lowering cost. And every organization is seeking new ways, every way to crush out this transactional waste. That's the theme of the webinar today. And the real question is, where do you start? And we want to get real with you and talk about challenging the status quo and giving you some thoughts from the front lines of what we're seeing with our clients. So we're going to talk today, starting with the current state of the industry and sort of look at the long-term vision of EPCs and capital project-driven organizations. We have some ideas and lessons learned we'd like to share. We also want to talk about sort of the foundational elements of what can make this possible to take some process improvement areas around smart contracts and confirming that transactional trust that everybody's looking for. And we have a demonstration to share with you as well as an example of how transactional trust can drive this process improvement. And William will take us through an example of that drove some significant impact to two organizations that were part of that example. And along with the demo, William's going to share a little bit about some quick implementation tips of how to get started. And so we're really thrilled to have a trusted partner with us today with Prairie Dog. Pete and his global team share the same passion that Data Gumbo has to serve our customers with ideas that can drive impact and position organizations to really thrive in this ever-changing the ever-changing world that we live in, and the success of the enterprises that we serve together. So without any further ado, Pete, I'll hand it over to you and show us the way.
Thank you, Bill, Max, William, Data Gumbo, the team. Appreciate being here with everyone this morning. I guess I'm going to start out with, as Bill suggested, talking about the why we are so concerned about transactional waste and the opportunity to immediately and drastically improve performance on capital projects, turnarounds, and maintenance globally. What we're showing here are some research results from respected industry associations that really ought to be a call to action to all of us. I mean, they're quite sobering metrics when you look at the CII data indicating that approximately 95% of all capital projects don't come within 3% of their budgeted cost or schedule objectives. The situation's worse even on mega projects, but the one we're really addressing today is a potential area that we want to target is this transactional waste piece on the right, which we estimate is about 40% or so on non-residential capital projects. It's made up of a number of things I'll share with you here in a moment. But I would like to also say, I guess I agree with the CEO of one of the blue chip companies in our industry, S&C Lavalin, last year, who quoted, "I think the current model within our industry is broken." And I really believe he's speaking to the business model. We've spent years trying to improve capital projects by focusing on work process improvements, technology, project management enhancements, and so forth. But I think we've really missed the boat, and that we've really need to address the business side of the business, the finance, the legal, tax, the accounting, the contracts. And that's really what we're addressing here today. And if we really get that right and tackle that in a methodical way by using proven technologies like we're going to be talking about here with smart contracts and blockchain, then as a start, then we really can start chipping away at that waste. This is how that waste breaks down by category. Now, most of the time when we talk about waste on projects, our minds tend to gravitate towards field waste. That's like materials waiting on people, people waiting on materials. That's that orange kind of colored slice at about 3 o'clock on this chart. And that truly is an issue still. And there's a lot of people attacking that. And that's things like, advanced work packaging, which is absolutely critical, and lean, and other things that we're trying to do to improve time on tools in the field. But you'll notice there's actually an even bigger source of waste that many people may not be aware of, this whole idea of trade credit and debt financing. And this is a financial source of waste, and largely due to, well, two things. Debt financing is easy to understand. That's the debt load that sits in the industry when companies buy and sell each other and so forth. But the other piece is this trade credit that comes about because we tend to pay everyone late. And that really starts with the owner, and then it trickles down through the supply chain, which is, very hierarchical, as you may know. It's kind of a pyramid with the owner at the top, and then the EPC firm, and then they hire, subcontractors and vendors and so on and so forth. And at every layer, there are transactional costs. There's risk and protectionist dollars. There's non-value added transactions, if you will. And that's really the hierarchical nature of the supply chain is really something we need to try to flatten over time. And we think we'll see a flattening of that as we move forward in the next few years. But this trade credit issue is of great concern. The average payment terms in the industry, according to CII, are about 75 days in industrial construction. It can range, of course, from 30 to well over 100 days, of course, and many of you may have experienced that. But when you look at the aggregate effect of that macroeconomically in the industry, it actually accumulates at about an annual percentage rate equivalent of over 26%. So in many respects, it's like an owner using a 26% interest credit card and financing their project. Doesn't seem very smart. Yet that's really what we end up doing by the fact that we end up paying people late. There are other issues on here that are certainly worth, entire college course to discuss, but hitting on a couple of them, like this whole idea of the RFP bidding and PO process. We have very rigorous and actually quite, in many cases, good procurement processes in the industry. The one challenge we run into, though, is they often take a long, long time, many, many months often. And so while we may save a few dollars on a purchase, a 3-bid and a buy bidding process, the time involved can be actually more damaging than the money that we save in that whole exercise. And so speeding up the execution of projects is just as important as saving money. And we all know, of course, time is money, as we've all been told and probably experienced. Now, this brings me to the bigger business issue I want to talk about here is OS2, Operating System 2.0, which is an initiative that's being led by the Construction Industry Institute at the University of Texas in Austin in collaboration with various partners, including the Construction Users Roundtable and Prairie Dog, as you can see on here, and a variety of other organizations. And it started last year in 2019. It's a very intense research and development effort. And smart contracts and blockchain play into this as being very foundational for really designing the business model of the future for the industry, the new ecosystem that we see coming about for the built environment. And I'll talk a little more about why they're so foundational. But let's start with the one at the top here, this idea of goal congruence. What this is about is this is really trying to create for capital projects and portfolios of projects a shared success model. Today often owners go into developing a project and it's very difficult to construct the series of contracts with all the value players that have to come together to deliver a project and make those contracts and those motives and behaviors aligned towards that common business objective of the owner. In fact, many times the contracts promote sometimes the exact opposite behavior of what the owner is striving to achieve. And it gets really complicated on larger projects when you have so many interfaces that have to be managed. So how do we create a different type of environment where really people are not acting so much as strangers? And in fact, there's a saying I heard a long time ago in the industry. It's always stuck with me. It says, we come together on projects as strangers and we leave as enemies. How sad is that? But how true it is, right? Why can't we act more like neighbors, where we have a kind of a shared cause, a common objective that we as a collective group are trying to achieve. And when I talk about the group, I'm really referring to owners and engineers and contractors and suppliers and vendors and distributors and reps and all the people that come together to deliver capital projects. Could we construct this type of neighborhood setting where people have a near-term objective, of course, their own profit objective, and everyone needs to make profit, of course, otherwise why are we in business? But also being associated with kind of this greater purpose, this greater good, where we have some rules and behaviors that we all agree to abide by, if you will. Now, smart contracts and blockchain are foundational for this. If goal congruence, if you will, is the roof of the house, the foundation here is smart contracts and blockchain. And blockchain is super important for creating a rich data environment or a data lake upon which we can then build a lot of additional functionality and algorithms and machine learning and AI and all the things that are going to be coming into our industry and providing a foundation for that. Now, when we have foundation, like have this rich environment, we can do some pretty cool things. Now, one of them that's particularly interesting is this idea of doing a better job of dynamic risk modeling. Now, risk, of course, is dynamic in that it lives on projects and it changes, and it lives within the organizations themselves. How can we do a better job of understanding those risks, quantifying them, and managing them as they live dynamically, not only through the project's life, but through the life of a portfolio of projects? Supplier engagement's really about how do we flatten the supply chain? How do we get the innovative suppliers? Because most of the innovation in the industry, let's face it, sits down with the suppliers and the vendors and the people that are inventing new products and systems and methods and materials and so forth. How do we get that earlier into the project life cycle so it can deliver value in front end, rather than relegating those suppliers to a 3-bid and a buy PO process later in the life cycle where they're kind of bidding to a spec rather than bringing their innovations forward earlier. So this is a kind of a high-level overview of Operating System 2.0 and the research and development that's underway. So really proud to be part of that effort. We have some incredibly talented academics, and the effort at CI is being led by Dr. Stephen Malva. Many of you may know him. He's the director of CI, and he's a good friend of mine. So let's now talk about more details around smart contracts and blockchain. And how can they work in a capital project space? This diagram may look a little busy, but it's actually pretty simple in principle, and I'll walk you through it. The heart and soul of it's right in the middle, that smart contract. And Bill's going to talk to us more in a moment about what a smart contract is and how it's tied to the paper contract and so forth. So I won't get into that, but suffice it to say a smart contract is essentially just a digitized version of the commercial terms of the paper contract. So all of you today operate in the industry using paper contracts, we all do. This particular illustration shows a relationship between an owner and a contractor, but you can replace that with any two parties you like. It could be engineer and fabricator, contractor, subcontractor, it doesn't matter. It's any two parties that would be contracting to deliver some sort of product or service on a project. Now, the stuff on the left, it says IoT data, Internet of Things data. What this is simply representing is the various data systems that exist on projects today, whether it's 3D models, you can see that on there on the far left, ND design models, reality capture tools, QA/QC systems. I'm particularly interested in this advanced work packaging tools that are maturing and really becoming more and more powerful in the industry, where we can capture completed work events and work packages. It's often referred to as IWPs, installation work packages. But whatever type of product or service you are delivering to a client, that's being captured in some way using some sort of data system. So I'll give you a couple examples to think about. Perhaps you're getting paid by the hour. Well, you probably have weekly approved timesheets that are substantiating your paper invoices today, I would imagine. So instead of creating a paper invoice with these paper timesheets essentially, although I know they're sitting in some kind of system like SAP or Oracle or ADP or whatever you may use, we can tap right into those systems directly and have API connections and bring that data right into the smart contract to evidence the approved and paid time. We can do the same thing with completed work events. Let's say you're on a unit rate or a lump sum contract and you're a contractor and you complete a piece of work. You install a pipe spool or you install a work package, and you can apply rules of credit here as well. You get 10% credit for this step and 20% for that and so on. Anyway, maybe you have a quality inspector that says, hey, that completed work is done, and has an iPad in the field or goes back into the job trailer and keys it into the computer or whatever. We can take that type of information as well. We can basically take any data evidence that substantiates a completed piece of work and feed that into a smart contract digitally with no touch, no hands, no manual effort whatsoever. Now, what happens? Two things. One is we can trigger automatic payments. So the bank account of the payer is tied to the bank account of the payee. And as soon as that payable event is registered in the smart contract, payments can be triggered. So what does this do? Well, this actually creates a situation we call micropayments, where you can literally get paid daily or weekly or whatever frequency you and your partner on the project desire for those work events. And so essentially gone are the days of creating a monthly invoice, waiting 75 days or whatever to get paid. You can basically get paid instantaneously with no invoicing required whatsoever. The second thing that happens is that transaction's recorded on a data block. And a data block, like the one that Bill and William will show you here in a moment, called GumboNet's an example of that. So the data block is a immutable block, meaning it can't be changed, and it's a recording of that transaction, of that event, that payable event, whether it's the payable time or the payable work piece of work in the field or whatever, those examples I gave you a moment ago. And when the next event occurs, it sits on top of the prior one and so forth, which creates a chain of blocks, hence the term blockchain. It's just a chain of blocks. It's nothing more complicated than a digital ledger. And so a lot of people confuse blockchain with things like cryptocurrency and so forth and so on, but they're actually unrelated. Cryptocurrency does require blockchain to operate, but blockchains do not equate to cryptocurrency. They're mutually exclusive technologies. We're not talking about cryptocurrency today, so I do want to make that clear. We are talking about transacting real dollars and cents. And so now, once those transactions are recorded in the blocks, they're visible to all the parties simultaneously back into their home systems, their ERPs, or whatever systems they choose. So if one runs SAP, the other runs Oracle, the other runs QuickBooks, it doesn't matter. It's all visible to all parties simultaneously at the same time. This really takes us from what's shown on the left, this kind of paper-based process we have today with all the parties transacting with manual invoices and POs and so forth, into a new digital future where you really have a shared single source of truth across all parties to the venture. Now, if you blockchain and use smart contracts across all the contracts, you really would have what you see on the right, where every party to the smart contracts that are part of the developing the project or the asset see the same single source of truth real time. This is important because today we actually have multiple sources of truth on a project. You can walk into a job site at any given point in time and you'll have the owner's truth, the contractor's truth, the engineer's truth, and everyone thinks they're right. And in many ways they are right. The problem is the data is always lagging. The world of project controls, the data is always or typically running 2 to 4 weeks late. So we're often driving by looking through the rear view mirror. This gives us a situation where we're actually looking through the windshield. We're actually able to make real-time management decisions to move the project forward using data that's fully transparent, auditable, in a trusted system. This actually helps create trust, because a lot of the lack of trust we have is because we have disagreements around the data and the status of projects and so forth. We can even do things like automating lean releases. We can, there's a whole bunch of other things that come about by using this sort of technology. So it really starts to create great power in the richness of the information and the high fidelity of that as well throughout the project. Now let's get into talking a little more about those payment terms. Now, today the typical manual process can look something like this invoicing process. Sorry, there's a little lag in the mouse, so I've jumped ahead a couple. Let me go back. What we have on the top is kind of today's process. Now, this may or may not be exactly your process that you have, but it's probably close, where you start with it's all manual, right? You have timesheets or progress measurement tools. You have some kind of verification of the completed work. You go through approvals and signatures. It goes to the field office, then the home office, month-end consolidation. You get the idea. It's very rigorous, onerous, and it's rife with error because, we're all humans and we all make mistakes. And so it's very common that, contractors or engineers submit invoices, they have mistakes. And then they have to go this is how we get to 75 days or 100 days or whatever. You really now in the future get to this thing where you literally have 2 steps: digital verification of completed work and payments. All that other stuff is gone. Imagine the savings now. You can really cut down on your project accounting people, your accounts payable, accounts receivable, project controls. This can have an immediate and dramatic reduction in project indirects and overheads. And in fact, we've been working with some contractors already that are estimating saving between 10 to 20% of indirect cost on projects just by using smart contracts and blockchain alone. That's incredibly powerful. And as Bill and William will show you, you can basically turn this thing on and it runs and you start saving immediately. There's numerous benefits for owners and providers. I'll hit some of the owner ones first. And by the way, on the provider side, that's everyone under the owner, if you will: EPC firms, engineers, contractors, suppliers, and whatnot. But for owners, if you're paying faster, you're likely going to be receiving early pay discounts. Now, longer term, what will happen is that's kind of the immediate term. The longer term, if we start paying faster and get the velocity of cash flows sped up throughout the industry, then we should have a reduction in the whole rate structure, because this whole cost of capital that's weighing us down today will work its way out of the rates over time. At least theoretically they will, they should. You would only pay for what is received. Today, a lot of times owners pay for things twice, or they pay for things they never got. This basically eliminates the opportunity for that. It plugs holes in the bucket for the owner, so they really have high level of accuracy for what they pay for. It reduces their overhead costs. They don't have to receive those nasty big old invoices and find all the errors and kick them back to the contractor and all of that. All that goes away. Achieve full digital twin. Not only now, and the digital twin is being pursued aggressively by the BIM folks, the Bentleys and the Autodesks and companies like that, and they're doing a phenomenal job advancing that. But now with blockchain, you can not only record all the technical information, you can record all the financial transactions as well. And this now really creates the ability to have full digital twin capability for the owner, where they can have full provenance of traceability of all of the materials, all the transactions. They can even determine, if they so choose, who installed what pipe spool on what day, if that's of interest to them. The amount of fidelity and visibility into the data is incredible. Maybe most importantly, they can be seen as a client of choice, because one thing contractors want is they want to get paid on time. And if they have an option to work for owner A and owner B, and owner A is going to pay them in 120 days and owner B is going to pay them in 1, well, they're going to go work for owner B. And they're probably going to give them their best team, and they're probably going to have better productivity and better quality, because they want to have good completed work that's certified complete so they can get paid. It also minimizes disputes. This takes off the table a whole bunch of opportunities for argument and mismatch of data and disagreements. Disputes may not go away completely, of course, but they would certainly be dramatically reduced. And you can see some of the others on here as well. Switching over to the provider side, anyone providing products or services on a project, getting paid much faster is probably the most compelling thing, but freeing up your working capital. Maybe now you don't have to have a line of credit at the bank to make your payroll and to buy your products and services and so forth, because you're getting paid quickly. So that can help reduce your overhead costs. You can probably reduce your project accounting and your project controls and your accounts receivable people and all of that too. Automate your invoicing process. Eliminate contract leakage. I've worked in them for years for contractors, EPC firms, and so on. And it's pretty common that contractors leave somewhere between 5 and 10% on the table every year in just invoicing errors. You can recapture all of that. Improve client relationships, of course, and you see the rest of them on here. This is a very compelling thing for both owners and anyone in the supply chain. And again, the nice thing is we can implement it immediately. I would like to turn it over to Max now, who's going to run a poll for us before we kick off with Bill, who's going to describe for you now how smart contracts are built and how they work. And so, Max.
Thank you. The poll is up on your screen now. We'd love to hear your answers. What production gains can smart contracts bring to your organization? And if you're not sure, just tick NA. I'll close the poll in 30 seconds or so. So if you've got a second to push an answer, that'd be great. You can choose multiple answers also. Bill, I can leave that running if you want to get started.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. You can take the poll off so I can see the screen. But right. Okay. I'm going to talk about some smart contract elements. And I think when we look at taking data, and what Pete had talked about specifically was, you've got companies all around the world collecting a lot of information, and everybody's heard the term big data, right? And when it comes to big data, we're not a big data play, we're a specific data play. And when it comes down to what's the point of having data, what I found to be in my career working with companies, small, medium, and large, is no one's ever told me they don't have enough data. The question becomes, what do we do with it? And I think smart contracts become a very important part of being a home and having a home for using the data for a specific purpose. And so the foundational piece of what we're talking about is how do organizations take all this information that's being collected at a variety of locations in different forms and put it into use. And it's really all about putting the foundation in place where you define the contract. It's really taking the natural language agreement between two parties. We've got to take that knowledge of that document, and we have to take that over to a world, make it electronic and smart. And so what the terms and conditions and the ultimate story behind this is an agreed upon component that moving forward, data will be used as the trigger point and effectively the audible, the immutable record that is evidence that something took place in the field. And so the fact of the matter is that organizations are collecting lots and lots of information in lots of different forms, whether that's Excel, whether that's an automated the cell phone has changed everything with how access of information can be provided. The smart contract becomes that foundational piece. And one of the things that's important about the story of innovating in today's day and age with all the distractions that we have is the reality of innovation is sometimes scary for companies. We're trying to survive. There's companies that are really in tough spots right now, and thinking about doing something radically new may be a fearful moment. But the reality of it is that all the studies about innovation during tough times, you look at the history and what it tells us is companies who have done things to change the way they do business in difficult times historically perform better than others that wait until things get better. And what I would argue is that smart contracts become a core part of meeting you where you're at with your organization. Most organizations have a project to pay and a procure to pay or a order to cash cycle that's very automated and does a lot of good things. Smart contracts can play a role, and it's not a role for every component of what you do. It can play a role where the volumes are high, where you're tracking lots of invoices, you're tracking lots of events that go into the actual delivery. And so when you look at criteria for what makes smart contracts applicable, it's our focus has been on organizations that have, if you look at OpEx and you look at CapEx and you find components of those that make sense, the criteria will always be high volume, lots of information being passed back and forth, and you've got to have information that can prove something took place. The trust meter is what this really helps provide, is transactional trust going through and using the industrial IoT elements, manual elements, text. I mean, there's all sorts of angles to this where it feeds the smart contract and the evidence is created to make a contract or meet the terms. And then what we work from is a scenario that is really focused on the exceptions, not the rule. Instead of touching everything, you're focused on the exceptions that don't meet the criteria of the smart contract. And that is an important differentiation of where this plays. So one of the components of what we want to take you to is just sort of show you some real examples of this. And what we've got is some stories that we can share from the trenches, and I'm going to pass the baton to William here, and we're going to talk and show you an example of how a smart contract was created, and it was done to take a specific use case and put that story into motion. So I'm going to pass the baton over to William Fox, our Chief Product Officer, and he's going to walk us through a real life example, and we'll talk through that from there.
Can I throw out another poll first?
Sure.
Great, thank you. That's the results of this last poll. And the next one is, what causes you to leave money on the project table. I moved that slide on. Bill, do you need that slide?
No, you can move it to William. Mine's delayed.
Yeah, slow. Take us a minute. William, I'll close this poll in 5 seconds and give you control. Great response rate. People are still voting, and I'll close the poll. 2 seconds. And there's your result. Not everyone voted, but that was due to time. But I'll move on to William now. You now have control. Mute me.
We don't hear you, William.
Hello.
We got you now.
All right. Sorry about that, folks. Got to be 10% smarter than my equipment, apparently. Right. So the example here is from the Operators Blockchain Consortium, which was a group of 10 oil companies that put money in together to experiment with blockchain. And the specific use case was a commodity transport use case. In this case, it was bringing produced water from well sites to saltwater disposal wells. But logically, in terms of business rules, it's basically the same as diesel delivery or cement delivery, any other sort of bulk measurable commodity. So in this case, what the parties decided to do was to validate the tickets being submitted by the trucking company by comparing the data from those tickets to data owned by the operator and the saltwater disposal well operators in the form of volume and time events. So the essence of the payment cycle here is that trucks come out and they pick up a certain number of barrels, and they're compensated for the number of barrels that they have hauled to a location to be disposed, and then that disposal location is also paid on a per barrel basis. So what it comes down to is matching the times and the volumes in the ticket against the times and the volumes observed from the control systems at the origin and destination locations. So the three parties each agreed to share this data, and the net result of that was that on a daily basis, the smart contract rolled up all tickets, compared them, and we had about an 86% first time go matching rate in the initial pilot, and then with some subsequent tweaks, no additional data, but subsequent tweaks to the parameters of the smart contract, we were able to get that into the mid 90s. And so both sides feel like this helped collapse a process pretty significantly from, at least on the payer side, a 31-step process down to a 2-step process. So now let me share my screen for a brief demonstration of what that looks like in the app. And I'm going to, oh, are you able to make me the presenter, please?
There you go, William. I just needed to switch you over.
Perfect.
Steal the mouse.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is a view of the 1.5 version of our app. Other blockchain or smart contract providers might have a different look, but for us, it is very, very contract centric, and every contract is built on a template. So these are the contracts that went with the diagram I just showed you. There's one for the haulage and one for the disposal, and that covers 3 different companies. But the origin of these contracts is from a set of templates that each party uses to negotiate the terms and the parameters of the contract. And so this does not in any way replace a legal contract, but what it does do is it standardizes the business logic and rules and provides a configurable multi-party way to then negotiate that. And so in this case, the breakdown was very simple. It was what are the dollar amounts per barrel for different counties from various facilities to other facilities. And I'll skip ahead here and look at an active one. So both sides are able to come in here and agree on the validity dates, the parameters, the dollar amounts, the facilities covered. They upload a copy of their legal contract and agree that that legal contract is being implemented by this code. We've done a lot of work with Norton Rose Fulbright, who's our corporate advisors, and they're also part of the U.S. Digital Chamber of Commerce around providing maximal legal enforceability for these contracts. The general consensus is that you must combine the code that is executing the contract with the natural language contract signed by a designated representative of the company into a package. And once that is done, that this is very much admissible in court and is a legally enforceable contract in most jurisdictions. So once that additional contract, once the contract has been set up, we can go over and see the contracts are running on a ledger. There's not just one ledger. You can have as many ledgers as you want. What we typically see is one per project with multiple participating vendors. And then finally, the contracts, when they go live, start generating blocks. These blocks, in this case, each block here represented a particular delivery. And you can see, without going into too much detail, that we have information from the vendor, the trucking vendor's ticket. This was a three-way match for ticket number 187082. And you can see that the volume reported was within a specified tolerance of plus or minus 1.6% from both the from meter and the to meter. And as a result, that particular charge was marked approved and went straight through to invoice without any additional human touches on either side. It was rolled up into one of these invoice blocks. The invoice blocks generate whatever postings are necessary to go into the payer's ERP system. In this case, it was SAP. And so they get JSON objects to do postings, and they get PDFs formatted in the appropriate invoice format for whoever the companies are. And I think one other critical point here is that because the smart contract is generating the invoices, they're actually generating pre-approved, pre-reconciled accounts payable invoice, but also accounts receivable invoices for the vendors. So there's a huge reduction in workload on both sides, and we managed to remove quite a bit of reconciliation from both sides because the smart contract is doing that upfront at the time and point of service delivery rather than after the fact in the rearview mirror, as Pete says. So there's one other aspect to that, which is we did do a little bit of a dashboard just to show a little more operational view where you can see the individual facilities. In this case, we were getting real-time data from the facilities every 8 minutes. And then also getting trips from the trucking company. And as the trips come in, they are matched against a particular volume event. And you can see this one here, the well saw 149.97 and the truck reported 150. That's less than that's 0.02% variance, so that was approved straight through. So now I will change the presenter to Data Gumbo.
Pass the baton back. Thank you very much.
Yes, and if you wouldn't mind sharing that and going, oh, there we go, perfect. So what does this mean sort of in terms of making this happen? What we're seeing is kind of a very repeatable cycle now where the best case is for companies to look at a specific use case, specific business case that they want to focus on first, value stream map that current process versus what a future highly automated process could look like, and then use that to determine a business value. Because ultimately, if there's no business value in doing it, if the existing system is either good enough or the data doesn't exist or nobody's going to support it, then there's no point in doing it. Use that business case to get buy-in from the key stakeholders. We work with you, or you can have other parties work with you to write the smart contract, which again is just the operational business logic. It is not replacing the T's and C's. connect to the source data systems, connect to the payment systems. We always advocate for a live in parallel 30-day test with the existing system so you can see the difference in experience. And then what we're seeing pretty consistently is a go live from 3 to 4 months from the decision to go forward with the project. And with that, I'll hand it back to Bill.
Thank you, William. Yes, I mean, the good news is that all of this has a lot of moving parts to it, but the good news is this is proven. There's lots of interesting stories out there where organizations have taken a look at their overall process maps and talking about the current state. That's the results there you're sharing, or we should go back to that another, but you want to show that real quick, Max? The results, can you go back, or do we want to go? So
there you go.
Contract administration and change management, so number one. Yeah, I think that's actually parlays into the closing points here, the takeaways, which is really the biggest barrier to making this happen.
Poll before you move on? One last poll.
I wouldn't. Let's just keep going.
Nope.
Yeah, let's just keep going here. You know, so the key takeaways here, if you look at the results of the poll, it actually parallels what we see in reality, which is there's a lot of change management that's in the way, and that's part of the challenge that we have. And I think I started at the very beginning sharing the story of we're all in this together, and we all have to look at our businesses a little bit differently today. And as history shows, those who do make process improvements and look at their businesses critically during crisis have performed better. But those that have made those process tweaks and have looked at their businesses critically coming out of any kind of crisis historically have performed far better. And I would tell you that this is not some space age thing that's out there that's not proven. You can use this proven technology today, and you can begin now. This is not something you have to wait for because something is not out there that's sort of curious and unproven. So having something that's proven helps people feel better that they're not taking a risk, they're not the first mover. The ability for you to look at the current landscape and recognize that you can begin now and you can crawl, walk, run. This is not something that is a large ERP implementation, which I've spent 25 years in. This is something that literally allows you to not rip and replace what you currently have. This is about taking your core and making your core better, and allows you as an organization to not have to look at a huge upfront expense to make this a reality. And so when you think about tying together timing with all the focus that we have today with COVID and the home-based workforce and the ability to have essential workers frontline, we've had many conversations with organizations around the world, and they're looking at their businesses differently, and they're looking for ways they can begin something now to supplement their core and adapt their core, enhance their core. And they certainly don't have an appetite to have a big expenditure up front. And so everything we've shown you, everything we've been talking about really is a perfect storm for how you can take advantage of and get very fast time to value. And you can't ask for a better situation when you have an investment in your organization where you look at a process critically, you're making a current process better, and you don't have to rip out and replace something that you've invested in. We can enhance what you're doing and do that in a way that you effectively have to prioritize, and the compass that is the best compass to use is how quickly can we receive benefit. And as William mentioned, the ability to put a smart contract in place, picking the right smart contract it's not boiling the ocean, and finding the right one can help you minimize risk and help you get fast time to value. And then what we're seeing happen on a regular basis, every project we're involved in, it leads to more projects because they see how it works and they see how it brings value across the enterprise. So I think if we were to succeed in helping shape this message for you as you take it back to your enterprises, I mean, these 5 bullets are key takeaways. That's a fact. That's what we're seeing frontline. Pete sees it globally. with his organization. We see it globally with Data Gumbo, and we'd love to open this back up to some questions and see if we can ask some or answer some questions for you from the field, and wanted to leave enough time at the end here to do so. So Max, do you want to open up chat and see if any questions we can answer?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions here, which is great. The first one I'm going to direct back to William is, what kind of savings were realized by the project you described, and what kind of timeline was experienced to get there, or to get that?
Yeah, great question. So I can say this because it was in the press release from the OOC. The operator estimated that their total contract execution cost savings were 25% for the locations that were covered by the smart contract. And that was a combination of reduction in rounding up. It was a reduction in reconciliation, reduction in, there were some locations where people had to physically get on the road to go pick up paper tickets. And as you guys know, every time somebody gets on the road, it costs about $600 and it's dangerous. And then there was also some additional middleware they were able to turn off, which was costing them dollars per invoice. So the combination of those things together ended up being about 25% of the contract value. And in terms of how long it took to get there, from the point that the data was made available, it was live in 90 days.
Fantastic. And the next one is for Bill, and you probably just did answer this, but who typically creates contract templates? Based on experience, to what degree can templates be reused between projects?
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a question. I mean, I think it's evolving, right? So I think right now, our team is helping with Pete's team, organizations review their natural language contract and convert them into a smart contract. As these continue to evolve with projects that we have in the field, those libraries become bigger and bigger with reusable contracts. And if you look at the consortium's vision and other organizations, the ability to create standard contracts, it's not by coincidence that law firms love this, because they want to offer smart contracts to all their clients. And then the network effect takes into place where you have the ability to quickly spin up agreements based upon a library of reusable content. And then those become the baseline for future trading relationships, which is exactly what you want. That's the efficiency of messing around with 300-page contracts. You can execute a contract that's already been built, pull it from the library, and execute it moving forward. The long tail, or the view from the future, is if you envision a world where you have your own private blockchain network, where you have the ability to work with your supply chain with a library of contracts that have been pre-built and already worked on, your ability to spin up a new one is going to be something that our customers will take full advantage of. So our crawl is that with the help of Pete and his team at Prairie Dog, and with Data Gumbo's team, we're going to help teach our customers how to do this. And then the future state, there's going to be a library of reusable. And frankly, I view customers being able to share those with others. So that's the beauty of how this will take fold.
Great. Well, thank you,
I'll
James.
add one thing to that, Max. I want to add just one comment to that. That we can create a smart contract today of any paper contract, essentially, of really any type, whether it's T&M, reimbursable, lump sum, unit rate. What our hope is, our belief is, in the future, as we do more and more of this, and these libraries are created, the paper contracts themselves will become smarter as well, and become less onerous, less contentious, more streamlined, more automated. So as we journey into the future, create these libraries, Bill just described very, very well, the paper contracts ought to then transform as well. So that's a great destination. Our industry needs to go there to cut back on this transactional waste we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and IACCM with Capgemini are focused on that also. James has a second part to this question that I'm going to put to William. How is risk addressed in terms of bugs in the smart contracts or flags? Do you want to answer that one?
Well, I would have kind of two answers to that. The first one is that by starting off by running it in parallel to existing systems, there's a lot of opportunities to tune and tweak it to ensure that the contract will be as resilient as possible. The second answer to that is that we recognize that nothing's ever going to be 100%. There will always be edge cases, and as a result, we have dispute resolution mechanisms built into the platform. So, be familiar to any SAP user, things like accepting the charge, reversing the charge, credit rebill, adjustments, reprocessing data. So there's a number of ways to deal with that. And then the last thing I would say is that, Data Gumbo actually does offer insurance on the execution of our contracts. So for the ones that are developed by us as opposed to a third party, we'll also insure the excellence of operation of the contract if it runs through us.
Excellent questions there. The next one is from Calvin. He's asking 3 to 4 months. He's very impressed with the timeline. He guesses it's more complicated, but does it need to be a long-term contract to make it worthwhile for both parties or not? Does someone want to take that one?
Yeah, I guess I'll take that. No, I don't think it needs to be a long-term contract. I think, and what we've seen is that when you turn this thing on, basically, and it is on average about 3 months or so to get one created, as long as you have fairly clear line of sight as to where you want to implement it with your first use case or second use case or whatnot. But as soon as you turn it on, it starts the savings meter, basically. You're going to immediately start seeing value. So obviously, the longer you run it, the more value, I suppose, you get. But it's not like it has to go for some period of time to get payback. Your payback is almost instantaneous, because the commercial model around this is that, the people doing this, Prairie Dog, Data Gumbo in this case, get paid for performance, get paid for turning this thing on and taking a portion of the savings or the transaction. So it's not like buying licenses of Primavera or putting in an ERP system like Bill referred to up front. You don't have this big upfront investment. You essentially, theoretically, have almost no upfront investment, and you basically start saving when you turn it on. So, but I think for everybody, the longer the better. So.
Yeah, and Pete, I would just add one thing to that, which is that to the extent that you use an existing template that's configurable, let's say you developed it with one trucking vendor and you want to take it to the other 10, you just turn it on. I mean, it takes about 2 minutes to spin up a new vendor in the system. So
nice.
Yeah, that's the power of the library. Once you create, and if you're a contractor and you're buying electrical subcontractor services, or you're buying materials from a wholesaler, I mean, once you've done one contract, it's reusable. Now you might need to tweak it, but it's pretty quick and easy to do it the second, third, fourth, fifth time, whatever.
Yeah. So I've got room for a couple more questions. This one is about change management. Bill, could you take this? Are there any barriers in change management to get a new process in place with this technology? Bill or William?
Absolutely, there are barriers, and the barriers are companies' willingness to change. And I think the hardest part about this is, what do you mean I don't have to touch the invoice? What do you mean I don't have to physically go meet somebody to go through and review? These are the new world. I mean, we talked with a global service provider the other day, and they were talking about, in the old days, they literally would send a group of people to the site to be able to manage invoicing and disputes. Now with COVID, they can't. And so it's not prudent to do so with today's current environment, and that's not going away anytime soon. I wish there was a smart contract for COVID, but there isn't. The good news here is that it's not so bad. So we have to share stories of how companies, and what I will tell you, what's happened in our experience has been, in some cases, the service providers have been brought into a project, and candidly, they're a little bit of a lukewarm on the idea because of change. And 100% of the time, these service providers have gone through a process with us, and they have said, my God, this is exactly what we needed. This is fantastic. Can you take this to my other customers so that we can do this with all of our customers? That is pretty much a testimony of how change management can be broken, right? You can break down those barriers and just getting some success. And this is not a two-year, 18-month project. You can get a quick win You can show people how this is not a voodoo magic story. This is real, and with that becomes less risk, and people are easy. You know, there's a better path forward when you take away risk and you take a bite-sized win and you deliver that to your enterprise. In my personal opinion, is that this is career building, right? So you take this to your organization, you take something that is proven that can bring value, and you see how this can be done, and that your organization can taste this. This will spread like wildfire in your organization, and you will drive significant return. That's the way you get rid of change management, is through success. And so no one wants to be the first and step out and do something that's going to put their job at risk or their company at risk. Under zero circumstances are we saying that. This is absolutely aligned to help take change management and help people embrace.
Great. So, well, thank you. I don't think we've got time for any more questions. I'd like to thank Pete Dumont from Prairie Dog, yourself, Bill, and William for today. And Bill, you want to close out? We have loads of great questions. Hopefully we can answer them privately.
Yeah, maybe we can answer them directly to the individuals. We want to make sure we can respond and get you some feedback. This is an important topic. We're very thankful that you've taken the time out of your schedule to visit with us. We're here to help. We're in this together. Let's take the path forward and find ways that we can make our organizations better, and we're here to help. So we do appreciate you investing your time in the last hour with us. And Max, it's all yours.
Great, great. Well, shortly you will receive a recording of this webinar, which is fantastic. And as a thank you, you'll also receive a fabulously co-written point of view paper, Smart Contracts in Capital Projects, that we believe you'll find really informative and useful tool to share with your team. Also, if you want to reach out to us, Data Gumbo, you'll see our website and our social media pages are there. You can contact us directly on our website in our chat box, or email any one of us. And again, with Prairie Dog, their details are on the right of your screen right now. You can see their website, and Pete Dumont's email address is there too. So we sincerely hope this webinar met your expectations, but this webinar has now come to an end. I will be playing the intro video again. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.